Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Bratt, and I'm an assistant professor at the College of Information Science at the University of Arizona. This presentation was given at the annual meeting of ASIS&T, the Association for Information Science and Technology, in 2024 in Calgary, Canada. Yes, it was a bit chilly, but we all survived. And this presentation was given specifically in the special interest group for artificial intelligence. Now, I'm going to be focusing on a work in progress piece of research, which is titled How U.S. Academic Librarians Are Adapting LLMs for Library Practice, a qualitative interview study from 2023 to 2024. So, to begin, this study is focusing specifically on AI and more specifically on large language models in academic libraries. We focused here because there is a rise of the use of large language models in U.S. academic libraries, and yet we also lack widespread shared best practices for AI's use in libraries, archives, and museums. So given this, there has been a call in the literature for a deeper understanding of how AI adoption and the shared awareness and developing a shared awareness of how librarians are using, embracing, rejecting, incorporating, and generally using into their library practice LLMs. So given this nascent research and the very dynamic nature of the field, right, there's a lot of changes going on with adoption, with the hype cycle, the moral panic around LLMs. And so given this, we wanted to do a little more exploration. And this was driven by these two research questions. First, how are librarians adapting and organizing to use AI and LLMs in library practice? Second, what attitudes and practices are academic librarians engaging in with respect to AI and specifically LLMs? Now, this is a bit different from existing studies, which have specifically described the kinds of large language models that academic librarians are using. And while they've described the attitudes and practices, they have not looked at how the organizational process has come together, how libraries are connecting with each other at a more meso and macro level. And that's what we're doing here. So the study goals and methodology are first to identify specifically how librarians are adapting, how they're drawing into their library practices these technologies, and then organizing what communities of practice are coming out of these kinds of adoption measures around AI and LLM adoption in U.S. academic libraries. And then what we do for this exploratory study is a comparative case study of academic librarians and libraries with a focus on LLM and AI leaders. And so we'll operationalize leaders in this space a little bit more specific in the methodology section. So in this study design, what was our data collection and analysis? Well, we use semi-structured interviews with academic librarians. Right now, we have 20 total. Data collection is ongoing, but we are seeing a bit of saturation so far. This data is from semi-structured interviews. Now, because this is a comparative case study, we're also looking at institutional documentation. This includes things like LibGuides, what AI LibGuides are out there on these library websites, as well as social media forums, and also professional forums such as from ALA Core, and then also library policy documents related to LLMs and AI. The data analysis approach is ongoing, but so far we've been employing grounded theory-inspired content analysis of these interviews and thematic analysis. I will pause to say we haven't used LLMs for some of this content analysis, although that is a technique that's increasingly being incorporated into grounded theory, maybe not increasingly, but some folks are anyway. But we haven't done that so far. It's been traditional grounded theory method inspired research for that data analysis. Now, what are our key findings? Well, first, adoption trends. I'm going to plot spoil here and just tell you what our findings are, and then I'll dive into them a little bit more deeply. But first, we look at adoption trends. What are the adoption trends? So we see that librarians are using LLMs. They are adopting LLMs, and many of them are extraordinarily well-versed in the kinds of LLMs that exist, the ecosystem, and how they interact. And then specifically, they're doing this for the library services, but also for students and faculty constituencies at those academic libraries, at those academic institutions. Second, what do we find around leadership and organizing? So you remember that our research questions are focused on organizing and adopting. So here we're focusing on that organizing piece. We find that LLM leadership is coming from both within the library, from those traditional hierarchies and organizational systems, but also outside of the libraries. There's some resistance to corporate models of adoption, but those are ongoing negotiations. 3, we focus on ethical practice in LIS. So we find that ethics go beyond some of the topics that are frequently discussed in the narratives around AI, such as copyright and data privacy. What is high on the priority list of libraries tends to be also inclusive of things like preserving cultural heritage artifacts and other ethical constraints that arise within library practice that might not be the same as within other environments, like corporate environments. So what is our first finding? Well, let's talk about library LLM adoption trends. So this is a qualitative study, so we can't look at directly numeric quantification of these trends, but we can look at some themes. So we do see that information literacy courses are being used to incorporate AI for research. So traditionally, academic libraries have supported research efforts. And so we see LLMs being used by librarians and faculty in assisting faculty and student research. You see this with the use of, for example, Claude or Perplexity AI to do literature reviews, to find relevant materials, to even assist with finding 3D or digital objects within the libraries, collections, and holdings. Second, librarians expressed excitement and other similar enthusiasm about the applications of AI to search. Specifically, they're looking, one participant was really interested in the transparency of search. So libraries' traditional IR systems, information retrieval systems, are often opaque. They don't show how the results are created, but with the push for more explicable AI, librarians are excited about this application for IR within library systems. As well, we see that AI for citation management was really important, literature reviews and search, as I mentioned. And then as one university librarian from a US Midwest university mentioned that the adoption of technologies in libraries can often be due to pressures by publishing companies and the impetus of the library to adopt them. So even though these adoption trends show that librarians are interested in bringing them in to the library, there's often this awareness that there is pressure from the existing, for example, publishing companies, and that libraries are sensitive to that and acting as gatekeepers to potentially not adopting them. But we haven't gone that far in this analysis, so that's on hold for diving into depth as to how they deal with those pressures. But second, leadership, communication, and organizing. What did we find? How are libraries leading, communicating, and organizing around artificial intelligence and LLM adoption? Well, we see many hubs, actually. It's grassroots, right? But it's also this organizing, but it's also derived from existing platforms. So the ACRL, the Academic and College Research Library, I believe that's what that stands for, task force created a task force specifically for AI. And that's how I recruited many of our participants, in fact. As well, there are more specific and, as I said, grassroots efforts such as task forces within a particular university's library, so within the organization. There's also an incredible explosion of conferences around AI, webinars. Many of my participants mentioned attending many webinars. Also creating resources where AI is being developed. So GLAMS and Hugging Face are one example. There is a Hugging Face specifically for galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. Can you believe that? I kind of couldn't believe it when I first saw it, but that's actually an international portal where there's organizing going on around sharing large language models for libraries, right? For library collections, for digitizing, et cetera. And then adapting and gaining expertise. So what we see is a lot of the networking going on in communication is about how we adapt, how libraries are adapting the tools to existing services, and then also how to gain expertise and take courses, etc. Other things we find is that some of the LLMs are mimicking practices of similar institutions. Anyone familiar with institutional theory, new institutional theory? So, we can think about, oh gosh, not DiMaggio and Powell. Is it DiMaggio and Powell? Well, some new institutional theories that propose that there are certain types of institutional pressures. And one of them is this mimetic kind of force. And so some LLMs are looking to others leading in the field and following their example. So for example, folks will look at the Library of Congress and to see what they're doing with classification and AI. Some will look to the American Library Association, ALA, which has been a force for leadership across the existence of the profession. As long as ALA has been there, it's been a very leading body. And then we also see, as I mentioned in the first finding, resistance to certain corporate AI models. And finally, our third finding so far is that the ethical implications for academic libraries are front and center. Every single librarian that I talked to, again, exploratory interview, but this always came up. Ethics is very much front of mind. So a couple of things that came to mind that came up in these interviews that were kind of off the traditional narratives of what you hear about ethical concerns. So certainly data privacy, copyright issues, issues of sustainability and environmental impacts. These were all mentioned by most of my participants. But there were some interesting library-specific ethical implications. For example, oral histories and the replication of voices. This came to the fore with a university librarian in the Northeast. They said, suddenly somebody finds an interview in an oral history and suddenly you can listen to the voice in another app by replicating that voice. There are ramifications that they don't know how to manage. We are figuring out applications and respectfully managing the data. So these are ongoing issues. Letterpresses, even though they seem like a physical manifestation of reproduction of materials in libraries, there might be issues there that one participant mentioned, such as generative AI. And then also the equitable adoption across different libraries. Are universities resourced differently? Yes, they are. And therefore, as AI subscription models become well entrenched, we can anticipate there being a difference in the access to them between libraries and between library constituencies. And to the extent that the access that you have to an LLM helps you professionally, helps you to perform business operations, that is going to potentially cause and create an equity gap. So for future, we're going to be going to look at more of the opportunities and challenges for our research data management, specifically in libraries and archives and museums. We're going to focus on implications for equity and transparency, like I mentioned, for information retrieval systems. And then finally, we find that library leadership is strong, but the issues of differently resourced universities will become persistent for libraries in the future. We're also going to discuss how these differences will impact the adoption of LLMs. So with that, thank you so much for listening, and I hope that I will see you and chat with you about all this interesting research in the future. Thank you.